You're listening to the Real Talk Real Estate Show with your host, Clayton Hepler.
Hey, Abraham, thank you so much for joining us at the Real Talk Real Estate podcast. Would love to, as you know, start our podcast with how did you get into the business, but give us a little bit of background about you professionally.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Clayton. Glad to be here. So I started my first real estate deal was a new construction flippable fourplex. And you asked about my professional career. I've been doing real estate and insurance sales pretty much back to back since I was 18. I'm 24 now. So I never went to college. After it's right out of high school, turned 18, got into insurance and then real estate. So what would you like me to go from here?
Yeah. You said you had a fourplex. Tell us a little bit about your fourplex. How did you hear about real estate?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So growing up, I had two inspirations. One was my older brother. He does single family houses. And one of the things he said to me really stuck in my mind when I was like 13 or 14. He said, if you can just get enough money for the down payment, you get a rental property, the renters pay the mortgage. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I said, man, that's so neat. They're buying you a house, essentially. And of course, later on, you find out about cash flow and appreciation, all the other benefits. But that was really neat to me. And then I had a friend whose dad was a contractor, and he owned a bunch of apartments. And so I told him, I said, listen, I want to do what you're doing. This was when I was like, same thing, 13, 14. He told me, he said, well, save up 50 grand and then let me know. And then we'll do something. So by the time I was almost 19, I was still 18, from insurance, I had saved up 50 grand. And so I went to him and it was initially I was going to hold these. It was 4 townhomes and ended up having them built. Ended up moving from where I lived near Chattanooga, Tennessee to Knoxville, Tennessee area. So I decided to sell those. And then I took the proceeds of that and bought a 20-unit apartment complex. So that's the short version of that.
So there the questions. A lot of my listeners are our age, and the question comes, and I've heard you on other programs and everything, and this is definitely a common question, but what gives you the chutzpah when you're 18 years old to be like, hey, yeah, I'm just gonna jump in here and do this 4-unit and then 20-unit. Walk us through that, and I want to hear how you established credibility and graduated up to where you are now. And I'm excited to get into there.
Sure. I guess what gave me the chutzpah, no one told me I couldn't do it. Maybe the ignorance of thinking, well, I can do anything, But yeah. Definitely at first it was a little bit of a challenge credibility wise, getting these, bankers or real estate agents to take you seriously. A couple of the number one is educate yourself, just like this. Listen to podcasts, read about whatever asset class you want to get into. Become familiar with the jargon, just so you know what you're talking about when you do approach these bankers and realtors. And the other thing that helped me a lot was getting a pre-approval letter when I was looking for apartments after I sold the fourplex. That was one big thing, was having, said, brokers take me seriously, and having a letter from a bank saying, hey, you're pre-approved to borrow X amount. That really helped me a lot.
Oh, okay. So you had a letter to say that you had a certain amount of funds that you could borrow. Unlike what a lot of times you hear, if you don't have the money and you don't have the experience from the start, you might not be able to have a pre-approval letter.
Yeah, that's true.
And that makes it more difficult, but still, you got into the 50-unit, you saved up the money, and what was the time period between when you got that fourplex and then when you bought the 20-unit? And tell us about how you found the deal, how you funded it, how you funded it, and yeah.
So the go back to the fourplex, I got a bank to approve me without a cosigner, just based on what I did was I bought the land, which I think it was 56,000, and they used that as collateral to give me a construction loan for 300. That's how I financed that. That just that deal as a whole, I made a little bit of money on it. Contractor went pretty over budget, like 80 grand over budget. I didn't know what I was doing, but I actually still ended up making maybe 20 or 30,000 after everything was said and done. But sold that, got all my capital back from it plus what I made, and then the 20 unit, it was 1.3 million, so 65,000 a door. Built fairly recently, between 1999 and 2005. I purchased it with 10% was cash, and then so the timeline, fourplex was started mid 2014, sold them in 2016. 2017, I found the apartments, closed on those, and between that and that time, I had saved up other money, and I had bought an office building with cash that was 150,000. I saved during that period of time. And the bank took that as collateral along with the 10% down to buy the $1.3 million 20 apartment complex.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then where was the deal? What made it a good deal? Tell us a little bit about your thinking and why you wanted to go from the 4-unit to the office. You said you bought an office complex?
I did. I bought. It's just a single. It used to be a house. It's zoned commercially, though. I use it for my insurance. It's a really good location in Sevierville, Tennessee, which is kind of the tourist area. It's near Knoxville. It's in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park area. That's where I live, actually. And the apartments were also in this area. And how I knew they were a good deal, the seller of these apartments was the original builder. The only reason he was selling was his business partner had died tragically in a plane crash, and he just couldn't handle it anymore. So, the old saying that I think it's death, disease, disaster, divorce, or investment.
Yeah.
I took over from a combination of improving it, replacing the carpet with vinyl, nice looking hardwood style flooring, improving the landscaping, and also raising rents and other improvements. 13 months after I purchased it, I was able to refinance out everything I put in. I put in 130,000 cash. I refinanced out 160.
Abraham, I think we're your speaker is cutting out. Where I'm losing you. I don't know. It might be your headphones or. It's a little better. It's still kind of
Cutting out.
Oh, now I can hear you.
Okay. Great. My bad.
I lost you there. We'll just cut out and talk about what you. I literally lost that whole thing.
Got it. Okay. So no, you're good. So how I knew it was a good deal. The main thing was the rents were very under market. The average unit was $150 or more under what the market rent was, because the people that built it did not raise the rents since they built it back 10, 15 years ago. So as people left or their leases came up, I would renew them at the higher rent, as well as improving, that area, the landscaping, removing the carpet, putting vinyl flooring in, and also implementing move-in fees, pet fees, and just professional management in general. The building was reappraised, the apartments were reappraised 13 months later for around 1.6 million. So I was able to refinance out 163,000. So I got back all my money I put in plus another 33 grand in 13 months for doing that.
That's incredible. And so you now you have the 20-unit apartment complex under management. Let me take a step back and maybe ask you something that I hadn't heard you been asked in the past. You're an insurance guy,
Yeah.
and there has to be some serious transferable skills from being in the insurance industry to being in real estate. They're both really people oriented businesses. Influence skills, sales skills. Could you speak a little bit about maybe your experience in that industry and how it's been transferred to your time as a real estate investor?
Yeah, sure. Like you mentioned, sales skills is really just people skills. It's dealing with people, and how I approach insurance is also how I approach real estate. Is you have to find out what is this person's problem that they need solved. And insurance would be, well, they may be overpaying or they need coverage for this or that. How can I solve this issue for them? Because that's how you get paid, by helping other people. With real estate, if you're approaching sellers, it may be that you're getting tired of it. They're ready to slow things down, or it's just too much of a headache. So you have the mindset of, how can I help this person solve their problem? And then, through the process, that's how you make money as well. It's a win-win for both of you. So it's definitely, I think, just trying to relate to the person where they're at, and see how you can add value to them and be beneficial to helping them out. And if you there's a quote I like. It says, "Best you can get whatever you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want."
Hey, Zig Ziglar, Zig
Yeah.
Ziglar.
Yep.
I love it. I love it. So you're in the 20 unit at this point. Where I understand now that you're not an apartment investor.
Mhm.
As your full time calling. Tell us a little bit about the little niche that you're in now.
Sure.
Um,
So through the process, like I said, I love podcasts. It's when I'd be riding around and seeing people for insurance or wherever I'm going, I always listen to a podcast. And, I try to expose myself to all the different niches in real estate. And one that kept coming up was mobile home parks. And, your first reaction is, I don't want to buy a trailer park. But the more I listened to it, I hear the numbers and, how much more attractive they were for multiple reasons. And what got me buying mobile home parks was, the main ones were, my biggest expenses with apartments was the ongoing repair and maintenance, which is usually 50% of every dollar that comes and goes back out. And then also just the constant turnover. The average person in apartment stay 1 to 2 years. With mobile home parks, ideally you get to a point where they own their own home. You're just renting them the land. So you have no repair and maintenance to their home. And so that cuts that expense out. It cuts your total expenses are usually around 30% if they pay their own utilities, versus 50% with apartments. And the average person stays 13 years in a park, if they own their home, versus 2 years with apartments. So those are the two biggest pain points for me with, just 20 apartments. Can't really afford to have, tons of help. So I'm doing a lot of stuff myself. Mobile home parks they're easier to manage. Those are a few of the reasons that drew me to them. So yeah, I'm all in on parks now.
so I saw that you had 253 units
Hmm.
and 430 units under contract currently. So tell us a little bit about how to approach this industry. It's a very interesting industry. It's still a little antiquated, but it seems like more and more capital is flowing into it.
Correct.
Um, Tell us a little bit about your experience in it, how you got into it, how did you break into the industry? Because I've also heard that breaking into it is a little bit more difficult as well.
Hmm. Yeah, the first how I initially started was, I actually managed a park for another investor I'd met, and it was a little smaller park, 35 units. I managed that for about half a year. The only reason I did it was so I could see kind of from the inside how these are managed, and the similarities and the differences between them and apartments. So I did that while simultaneously continuing to educate myself, listening to podcasts, reading books about it. And then I just started looking for park deals. And how I've found most of my deals have been off market through either cold calling or door knocking. Well, I'll literally make a list of all the owners in a certain metro area, and I'll go to their houses and knock on the door and say, hey, I live in this area, I own parks. Or I didn't at the time, but, would you be interested in selling your park? And then just listening to them. And like you were mentioning, this industry It is the least consolidated form of real estate, where, apartments, a majority of them are owned by big REITs or larger companies. 90% of parks are still owned by the original mom and pop investors. They're between 65 and 80. And I think I had a little bit of a competitive advantage there because that's the demographic I was used to talking with for insurance. So I was able to relate to these people a little bit easier, but they're super friendly. I mean, most of them don't, their family doesn't ever come around. They live out of state. And so, I mean, they're willing to talk to you a lot of times, just, like I said, cold call them or stop by their house and see if they want to sell, and you can build a relationship. And even if they don't want to sell right now, follow up with them, and then later on they might want to. So.
Wow. So you have been cold calling these mobile home park owners, and you still believe even now that the space has not been overrun by, I mean, overrun by some new investors, because I know that it was ripe to be. People have been saying more and more that there's been a lot more competition from REITs, from bigger investors, institutions.
Yeah, and there absolutely is. There's fewer parks out there. So there's almost, it feels like the same amount of competition because, there's more apartments, but there's more people looking for them. But there is still a lot of, you could say 20 to 50 unit parks. Those are kind of too small for these big investors to go after these REITs. And so there's a lot of opportunity to be found in that space. For example, I bought a 30 unit park back in May of last year, May of 2019, less than six. I bought it for 550. 6 months later, I refinanced it, appraised at 800, and I pulled out what was 180 something thousand dollars from that. So, I mean, more than doubled my money in 6 months just because it was so mismanaged and, filling lots and things like that. And rents were so low. So there's a lot of opportunity in these smaller parks. So it's not, and there's still big deals out there. I've got 3 parks over 100, 3 of the 4 parks I have in contract over 100 units right now. And 2 of those were off market. One was through a broker. So there's still opportunity out there. You just got to go out and find it.
How is your how are you financing these properties? Are you just refining and rolling all your existing properties? Do you have investors that you've raised money from?
So everything I own right now is either myself solely, or I have one other business partner that we own 50-50. Yes, a lot of it is just from refinancing and then going on to other properties, and also just my income still from doing insurance now part-time. A combination of those, and then it's the cash flow as well is how I'm financing these. But later on this year, I do plan on doing a syndication. But yeah, thankfully, as of right up until now, I've been able to finance these either myself or with a joint venture partner.
Excellent. So now that we want to jump into our real talk, real estate investment fire round, really exciting that you're into the mobile home park space. And I think some of these questions will be interesting given that fact. So what's your real estate superpower that makes you such a deadly investor at your age?
I would say persistence is number one. I mean, it took me almost 2 years from when I first really got interested in parks, and then started looking along before I got one. It took me about a year or so after I'd sold the fourplex to find apartments. So you have to stay persistent. This is a long game. You can't just think you're going to wake up and then it's just going to fall in your lap. So persistence is definitely key.
That's a great trait. What's your number one, maybe let's talk about maybe number one real estate book, and maybe your number one resource for a mobile home park.
So this is not directly real estate, though it's mentioned real estate in it. It's a book called Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. It was co-authored by Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, and then a guy named W. Clement Stone, who was actually an insurance. He owned the insurance company. He's an insurance agent. So, but it's an excellent book about staying positive, and it talks about using OPM and everything else. So I love that book. And what was the second question?
And your number one resource for learning about how to become a mobile home park investor?
I would say MHU.com, Mobile Home University. there. They have a podcast. This is put on by Frank Rolfe, who's the fifth largest owner of parks in the United States. I attended his boot camp. I highly recommend it. He's an excellent guy, great teacher. And he has a lot of resources there. And also, I have a podcast. By the time this airs, it'll be out. It's capitalcashflow.com. I'll be having a lot of stuff on mobile home parks is there for people to check out.
That's your own podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Capital Cash Flow. Excellent.
Yeah, except by the time this airs, it'll be launching actually tonight or tomorrow. So by the time this gets out, I'm sure it'll be up. Excellent.
So what do you use your I mean, obviously besides purchasing other parks, what do you use your real estate wealth for? Because that's the end goal for all of us.
Yeah, that's a good question. It makes me think of the quote from David Rockefeller. He's asking, how much money is enough? And he said, just a little bit more. So up until now, I don't really spend money on a lot of things. I'm really in growth mode. For fun, I build arcade machines. That's fun. I've got a dog, an Australian Shepherd. And just spending time with family is what I'm doing other than real estate. But I really try hard. And I'd say, number two to persistence is frugality. I try to save a lot of money wherever I can. I think there's a difference between being frugal and cheap. I'm okay with spending money on my education and, and things of that nature. But I try not to waste money on, drinking or smoking or things like that. Because that's more money that can be compounded and worth a lot more in the future if I can save it.
Yeah, I like that. So your fun is using your money to focus on your education and to build arcade games.
Yep.
That's cool. So what's been your biggest challenge in real estate?
If you ask me this at different points, I give you different answers. First one was credibility. Then it was finding the money. Then right now I would say, a month ago I'd have told you it was finding deals, but then, within the last 30 days, I got these 4 parks I've been pursuing for the last couple of years under contract. So right now I would say it is trying to build out better my management side of things. I have managers for the different properties, and I'm going to be hiring an executive assistant to kind of work with the managers and do a lot of the day-to-day things so I could focus more on the larger picture stuff like finding properties or acquisition.
Excellent. So what drives you to keep investing and growing?
The biggest thing that drives me is I feel like I can achieve great things. And I think we all can achieve great things. And I feel like I don't want to look back at my life and think, man, if only I had worked harder, if only I had built this up, to help my family or help other people, and not just, sit around in my parents' basement and play video games.
Right.
I feel like we have so much, with the internet and everything else, we have so much opportunity right now to really do something great. My biggest driver is, you could say, the fear of not achieving my potential.
Excellent. Abraham, thank you so much for joining us at the Real Talk Real Estate Investing Podcast. Really appreciate your time. How can our listeners get in touch with you or learn about your podcast or anything else like that?
Yeah, like I said, thanks again, Clayton, for having me on. I appreciate it. I've listened to several of your episodes, and I really enjoy it. I would say the easiest way to get hold of me, you can email me at abraham@capitalcashflow.com. And also on the website, you can click through the social media. But just feel free to email and reach out. I'd love to talk to anyone.
Excellent. Thank you so much again, Abraham, and have a great rest of your evening.
Hey, you too, man.